You know, we're very good at keeping people's egos in.
Yes. Yes. Well, and thank
Okay.
God.
There?
Cool.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the June 10th City Council work session. Welcome to everyone here and at home. We have two items on our agenda today. I want to say that Councilor Poling is on the phone, right, Councilor Poling?
Yes, I am.
Good. So we have a quorum. We have the first item up is the update on permitted overnight sleeping program. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor, and Mia and her team will take it away.
I'm the team.
Yay, team.
How is everybody? Okay. My eyeballs in. So I'm Michael Kennison with the Human Rights and Neighborhood Involvement Office in the City Manager's Office. And in case you didn't know, I'm the city's point person for rest stops now. Previously it had been Michael Wisp, but now he's on a different assignment in the organization. And we're here today to provide council with an update on the rest stop program. I think we were last here in July of 2014. And we're doing this prior to consideration of an extension to the ordinance, which is set to expire in October 2015. And then today we're also bringing to your attention a request from Community Supported Shelters, one of the rest stop operators, to add a rest stop at the Eugene Mission. We will not be covering information on Opportunity Village today. That council directive doesn't expire until spring of 2016. But we did hear your interest in a deeper analysis of the rest stop program at your council workshop. And we want to let you know that the University of Oregon Community Planning Workshop is currently conducting a program evaluation, and that also includes all the rest stops in Opportunity Village, and we'll have that report available sometime summer and early fall, so we'll loop back to you with that. But just a couple of the preliminary results I wanted to share with you are largely positive. For example, 84% of the businesses and residents surveyed were aware of and supportive of the program and staying at the stops. Residents report staying at the stops make them feel safer, more confident, more independent, and helps them transition to more permanent housing. So let me just step back a minute and think, get us all on the same page in terms of what the original intent of the program was, and that was really to respond to community requests to try something new that would allow for temporary, safe, and legal transitional shelter for the unhoused. The basis of the program requires a partnership between the city and private entities that are willing to manage the rest stops, and it's a format that gives community a way to contribute through a partnership with us at little to no cost to the city. Some of the elements of the ordinance is that it requires council approval to establish a stop. We avoid siting in residential areas or near a school. We allow 15 to 20 persons per stop. 15 is the baseline capacity, but recently we made a change that allows an additional 5 persons at the request of a site operator and the discretion of the city manager. And there's a sunset date, which, as I mentioned, is October 2015, and we've extended that twice since this was initiated in September of 2013. In addition to the ordinance, there's additional kind of rules governing what happens at a stop that are contained in an administrative order. And some of those key elements are that it requires supervision by site manager, so there needs to be somebody on the site. They have to provide weekly trash and portable toilet service. They maintain a site roster so they know who is at the site at all times. And then there's additional rules related to certain prohibited behaviors, public safety, visitation, personal property, and occupation of the site. In addition to what the ordinance provides as a framework and the administrative order, the operators themselves have a number of governance and camp rules and process associated with running these successfully. They have a very thorough vetting process, so you just can't show up and stay at a stop. You have to apply, and they want to make sure, the reasons for that is they really want to make sure that folks are a good fit for the stop and that they have the resources to manage their needs. And that includes things such as a background check and a medical questionnaire. Each resident enters into an agreement that they will follow camp rules and expectations, and if they break those agreements, depending on the severity of the offense, it could lead to an eviction. Some of those key rules and expectations include that residents must vacate the premises each day, although there may be some exceptions there for health reasons or other purposes. Alcohol, drugs, weapons, and violence or theft are not tolerated. Residents set goals and actively work on improving their situation, and everyone contributes to the maintenance and governance of the camp. On a recent addition to the program, we've been working with Lane County Public Health to provide guidance on best practices to ensure health and safety at the stop. So we've been working with Dr. Ludke and his staff on that, and we have an assessment tool now that's being used to help reinforce those best practices. And managers take an active interest in the situation of each individual at a rest stop. They serve as a coach, an information and referral resource, a supportive resource for folks at the stops. They have established relationships with agencies and organizations to help residents address immediate crises or address their longer-term goals, like transitioning to more stable permanent housing. And then another key element is that operators have clear lines of communication with the city. So I'm in regular contact with the operators, either via email or phone. We also meet face-to-face regularly. So we're really trying to troubleshoot or be proactive on any issues. That's been very effective. And another key piece of that is that the police department has a liaison now, both to the legal camping, such as restaurants, but also illegal camps that crop up. That's Lieutenant David Natt. And that has really helped us get ahead of things when we're anticipating that an issue or problem may arise. So that proactive communication has been really effective in helping us avoid any significant issues. I just want to briefly mention that part of the philosophy of the operators of the camps is that folks are actively engaged and contributing back to communities. So they really see value in that. And for example, at community-supported shelters, they've maintained a work or volunteer requirement ever since they've had rest stops for their residents. They've developed a partnership with the Parks and Recreation Division, so they provide volunteers for park cleanup. And this program really helps to foster community among the rest stop residents themselves, contribute to individual self-worth and purpose, and provides a valuable service to the community. Okay, now on to just who are our operators now. At the end of last calendar year, the county came forward with an interest in contributing to the Rest Stop program. Nightingale Health Sanctuary was a nonprofit that stepped up to manage 2 rest stops on land leased from the county at the Lane County Behavioral Health Campus. And that's been in operation since January 2014. And I'd just like to recognize and thank Steve Mokrahysky, Alicia Hayes, and Diana Avery at the county for really helping make that site a real success. It was originally proposed as a temporary site for the winter because it's used for parking during the football game days. So it has to be vacated during the football season. The lease has recently been extended to August 21st to allow for a smooth transition of the folks that are there. And the county's been organizing service providers on site to link residents with services and resources in preparation for a smooth move there. The unique focus of that site has been on the disabled community, so they have a strong partnership with Lila and Lane County Behavioral Health. And over 50% of the residents served there have had some form of mental or physical disability. They have 27 current residents. They've served 55 people at that site from January to date. 17 have since moved out, and 11 were evicted for not being able to follow the rules. The other operator of the remaining 3 sites is Community Supported Shelters. They've been involved since the program was established in December of 2013. They currently have 40 residents at those 3 sites. And one of the sites is focused on veterans. And Community Supported Shelters has a proven track record with all 3 sites. They also are the ones that design and build the Conestoga huts that are used in the car camping program in other areas in the community, as well as at the rest stops. Eric DeBurr is the director of the group, and he is effective in working closely with residents to develop kind of personalized plans for their transitions, providing some case management, counseling, and education for finances and other things for folks. And from the last calendar year, from June to June, they had 379 people apply for this to stay at the stops. They served 124. 60 individuals moved out. 24 were evicted. And the average stay now has been less than 6 months since they've been operating the program. Recently, Community Supported Shelters has expressed an interest in transitioning the Veterans Camp at Northwest Expressway and Chambers to the Eugene Mission property. Eric is collaborating with the mission in hopes of establishing a stop that would allow residents accesses to the services and facilities at the mission. Under current regulations, 6 people could stay at that property under the car camping program, but we're looking to actually make it a stop to have some additional capacity. The existing site at Northwest Expressway and Chambers would be held in abeyance until Community Supported Shelters had capacity in the future to potentially reopen that spot. And the transition would provide greater accessibility. So I don't know if you've ever been to the Chambers and Northwest Expressway site, but it's not very accessible at all. So if you have any kind of a physical disability, it can be very challenging. The mission property it'll be all hard services. It'll also allow convenient access to bus service, a lot more convenient access to that current location provides. It's a healthier environment. It's more separated from the highway and the railroad. It'll be improved shelter because it'll all be Conestoga huts. It won't be any tents or any other sheltering like that. And then it'll provide access to the other resources that the mission has. It will also allow for eventual expansion of the existing stop at Northwest Expressway from 15 to 20. And Eric has plans to request expanding capacity of all of his existing stops to 20 in the near future. Okay, so options for today is that we're asking that you consider a motion to add a rest stop at the mission. We're not asking you to take any action today to extend the ordinance. A public hearing is scheduled for June 22nd. Questions?
I've got Claire and I've got George. George Poling, did you want to be on the list to speak?
Yes, if I could, please.
Just a couple comments I wanted to make, and then I'll call on Claire. So I just want to express my appreciation, too, for the way the public and private entities have stepped up to this, because as you heard in the description, and this is for the public in general, that we have very little into it ourselves. We have made the land possible, but most of it would not have happened if we hadn't had, for example, Community Supported Shelters step up, or we hadn't had people who made money available for the toilets and the waste pickup and all of that. So it's really required, and I think it should be looked at as a community response, not a city response, but a community response. And it's been very successful because people have been very dedicated to making it work in a way that we don't have to have. We have an agreement, but we don't have oversight. That's not our part of the deal. So I'm very appreciative of that. And I think it's also important for the public to know that these are certainly pilots that we've been trying, but the overarching goal is that someday we get ourselves to the point where these aren't needed. And that's a really important thing for people to understand. We don't see these as indefinitely there. If we're successful at some of the other efforts we're making, we should see the need reduced and people actually finding permanent housing. I also think it's really important for people to understand that most of the funding we get as a city to help people who need housing comes through HUD, and these rest stops and Opportunity Village don't actually qualify as housing under those kinds of terms, so they wouldn't qualify for any of that funding. So we're totally dependent on public and the contributions the public makes to make these things work, and we have a great appreciation for them. I'd like to see I don't know if anybody else would, but I'd like to see what that assessment tool looks like, Michael.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
And I, too, want to thank the county for stepping up with Nightingale, and I just wondered if we have on our city website anywhere where people can find these, the contacts for all of these different entities, and maybe that leads to some information about how people can donate to them, because people all the time ask questions about what can we do to help. We don't know what we can do to help. So something that kind of straightens out that line to help people know where to go to contribute in many ways. That would be money, but time, all kinds of things that people could do. So, and then I do know for a fact, because I talked to the community support shelters, and to get the the vet site up and going by the mission, they are looking to try to raise about $10,000 to get all of those Conestogas built. So I just put that out there as a general information. Claire.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. I really appreciate a number of your comments and echo them, particularly the fact that these rest stops are really a strategy, a temporary way to get people off the streets, and are not meant to be a permanent fixture in our community as we work to more appropriate housing for people who need some transition. I'm definitely supportive of opening a rest stop at the Mission. I think that's a really great development out of the pilot projects that we created, and this partnership with private entities that are providing much needed services and really leveraging the resources of volunteerism that we have in the community. So that's exciting. I just wanted to share a couple of other things in terms of the impact of the 2 rest stops, again, in the Train Song neighborhood. I had occasion some months back when some of our illegal protest campers had decided to set up camp in Train Song right in the middle of a neighborhood, and I got a series of very upset phone calls from residents, and I called them all back. By the time I called them back, that rest stop had moved, so that was good, but I asked each of the women that I spoke to, and they all happened to be women, how they felt about the rest stop, and each one of them said, oh, the rest stop's been fine. They haven't been a problem at all. These illegal campers, on the other hand. So I thought that was very encouraging in terms of a formal place that we've given people access to that is serving, in my mind, the goals that we had set up. And I know some counselors have expressed some dissatisfaction with not having more data from community-supported shelters. And I did reach out to Eric DeBurr recently, and he is collecting data on how many people they've served, how long they stay there, if they're able to know where they went to, if they went somewhere else, how many people have been evicted. So I would have shared those details, but we changed email programs recently, and my archived email has vanished on me. So I will look for that and share that with other counselors if they're interested. And Eric, I'm sure, would be happy to send that to any counselors who ask for it. And then I also wanted to very much appreciate the county's role in opening up some of their property to a rest stop. That was a really critical change in demeanor, I think, on the county's part, and the kind of local partnership that I know I'd been calling for the last couple of years. And so I was very grateful that they opened up that place and that it's been such a success in serving people in particular with disabilities. Thanks, Michael.
George Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. Some of my questions were answered they weren't in the AIS, but you answered them in your presentation. I just really had one question. Do we know yet what Nightingale Health Sanctuaries, what their plans are to move? Or are those 28 people with most of whom evidently have physical disabilities? Do they have any place to go after August?
Well, they're working on that now. The county Lane County Behavioral Health is organizing a kind of a service provider fair, for lack of a better word, so that resource providers will be at Lane County Behavioral Health, and they're going to bring over all the folks from the camp to kind of go through that and see where they can plug into. I don't know how many folks have actually are landing where they're landing yet, and they haven't quite gone through that process yet, but they're trying to be as proactive as possible to find places for folks.
That's good. Are they looking at, is there a list of potential sites to just move it, or are they trying to like take each person and place them somewhere?
They're looking for more stable housing. Right now, there isn't another identified location or capacity among the existing stops for folks to go to. So Nightingale is interested in that, but another location hasn't been identified.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
George Poling?
Thank you. Actually, George Brown just asked the same question of Michael that I was going to ask, and I'm glad that the county is looking beyond the August date and working with the appropriate people trying to find alternative means for these people to, once they close that camp down, to move on. I do appreciate the limited information, Michael, that you gave us about the number of people, how many were have moved on to other housing, how many were kicked out, that type of stuff. And I'm one of the ones that I like that information. So I would encourage the people that is keeping all the statistics to come forward as soon as they can with it. The only other comment that I have is, well, two comments. One is I really appreciate the fact that the county did step up and open up the area that they did for the camps, and I appreciate the work that they've done since opening up. And also, I'd like to commend the community-supported shelters and the mission for working together to increase the number of veterans that can be helped on the mission's property. I think it's a great fit. The mission has proven itself over and over the decades that it can deal with these type of situations, and I look forward to that expanding and becoming one of our additional rest stops. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple more comments that I have is that I live near the mission, and I know that the mission has proactively advocated for folks who use that service how to kind of skirt around the neighborhoods instead of going through them. And that has made the closeness of the mission to the neighborhoods work pretty well. We've had very low impact of walking through the neighborhoods. And I do know that some of the folks who are live between where the rest stops are and the river have some impact on people going through their neighborhoods. And I think there might be, someone could be clever enough to figure out the least impactful route and encourage people who are in the stops to use that route so that that people won't have a feeling of too much pressure from traffic through their neighborhoods. That's good for the people who are using those sites and good for the neighborhoods and good for the longevity of the program. So if we can somehow proactively try to encourage that, I think it could be very helpful, especially as we go into this Animal Village discussion and all of these other things. There's so much sensitivity out there that just proactively saying we're trying to help you with what you're worried about, I think could go a very long way. And the other thing I think I wanted you all to know about it, one of the issues, it's with vets, it's with everybody, is in terms of keeping information. With certain folks, there's a real suspicion about revealing information. They worry that the government will track them or know where they are or things like that. So those are some of the challenges of folks using the facilities we have. Is some of the challenges of getting them into more permanent housing situations is how you, especially when they're already dealing with mental health issues and other kinds of issues, it's just trying to figure out a way to do this that helps them overcome their suspicion that if they reveal bad things are going to happen to them. So that's just something else I think you have to know that's in the mix of this, and especially among vets, by the way, because they're just getting over or trying to get over a lot of really traumatic things, and so they're having some kind of control of their information means a lot to them. I just wanted to share that with you. Anybody else have any other comments, questions? Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
if I might.
Yes.
Yeah, in following up on what you just said, I understand the concerns of people about their information and possibly feel like they're being followed or tracked. But I think the information that we're looking for can be gathered and presented in such a general manner where it's not identifying anybody in particular, it's just identifying the numbers. And I think if that is told to the people up front, I think they may have a different view of why the tracking is being done. Because in order for this program to be really successful, we need that type of information as far as how many people were there, with the average length of stay, if they've moved on to more permanent housing. We don't need to know where, just that they did move on to permanent housing. So I think that information presented to us in a more general manner is what I'm looking for.
Thanks, George. I think that's true, and it's been in the HUD world. One of the requirements around trying to, or best practices around housing people has been to identify them by name, and that's scary for some people. So I know you're not asking for that, but I'm just saying that's just part of what we have to understand. Is it adds to the complexity of trying to serve this population in any way. Thank you for your comments.
Our intention is to get that kind of information that Councilor Pulling is referring to, and we'll have that. We're going to try to do that systematically from all the stops, so we want to coordinate how everybody's reporting that information, as well as Opportunity Village too, and we'll have that when we have the results of the program evaluation to share as well.
The long-term thing that, Michael, is really that what we might hope to see is eventually some trends that show the need going down, and that we don't have to keep the capacity at the level that we're trying to have it at right now. So tracking information can tell you the trends and tell you what's working and what's not working, and really allow us to move to a better place for a lot of people, I think. So thanks very much. You want to put the motion on the table?
Sure. I move to approve a rest stop at the Eugene Mission located at 1542 West 1st Avenue in Eugene.
I'll second it.
Second.
It's seconded and seconded. Okay.
There it is.
All right. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4. Round
Aye.
5, and none in opposition. It passes. Thank you all very much, and thank you for the report. So next up is a timely conversation on legalized marijuana update. Did you read the article in the paper this morning?
Yes, we have been tracking a lot of information. Do you want us to come up on the scoot?
The latest legislative updates on that?
Yes, absolutely. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We're here today with a legalized marijuana update for you. My name is Alana Holmes, and I'm the Human Resources Director here at the City of Eugene. With the passage of Measure 91, recreational use of marijuana becomes legal in Oregon on July 1st. So at that point, basically, now marijuana is available to be sold, cultivated, and used by adults that are 21 and older. And so we've had our City of Eugene exec team create a task team across our departments to kind of come together and take a look at what that means for the City of Eugene, what are the potential impacts and what we should be thinking about. And so with me today are two other team members, Catherine Brotherton from the City Attorney's Office and Lieutenant Jennifer Bills with the Police Department. We as a group will be providing you with a brief overview of various aspects of the measure, and we will also ensure that there's adequate time to follow up with a question and answer period for you today. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine, who's going to provide some information on the measure itself.
So I'm going to Measure 91, for those of you who've read it, is super long. It's 86 sections long, and so, which is very long. What I want to talk to you today about are really just highlights regarding what's going to be permissible on July 1 and what's not. So kind of the real basic can and can'ts. So starting on July 1, what Measure 91 allows is the personal use and possession of marijuana by individuals 21 years or older. So then the next question naturally is how much? And the measure is very specific about that. Residential possession or production of marijuana up to the following per household units. 8 ounces of usable marijuana, up to 4 plants, up to 16 ounces of solid homemade marijuana products, and up to 72 ounces of liquid homemade marijuana products. So that's how much each per household can have. Every person can carry up to 1 ounce of marijuana in public. And then delivery from one person to another for non-commercial purposes is allowed for 1 ounce of homegrown marijuana, 16 ounces of homemade marijuana products, and 72 ounces of liquid homemade marijuana products. So that's kind of the basic what can be possessed per household and what you can carry out in public. So there's also a lot of things that cannot happen after July 1 and that are not going to be allowed by Measure 91. Using it in public. So there's the distinction between possessing it in public, carrying it in your pocket, being able to publicly consume it. So before and after July 1, marijuana you cannot be used in a public place. No use of marijuana while driving. No possession, use, purchase by anyone under 21 years old. The provision of it to somebody younger than 21 years is also prohibited, as well as providing it to anyone that's visibly intoxicated. Homegrown marijuana and homegrown marijuana products cannot be readily seen by the normal unaided vision from a public place. So you got a nice little patch of green grass right up on the sidewalk. That wouldn't be where someone's allowed to grow their marijuana products. Homemade marijuana extracts are prohibited. Importing and exporting marijuana out of Oregon is prohibited. Possession in a correctional facility is prohibited. Just an interesting piece that was added. And providing marijuana as a prize is explicitly prohibited in Measure 91. So now you can see why it's 86 sections long. They covered a lot of different topics. So that's the kind of can and can'ts after July 1.
Next up is...
So, of course, the next question is, what is the police department doing with the change in the marijuana laws? Well, right now we've been monitoring the legislative processes and what's happening at OLCC and hoping for some clarification on a few points involving Measure 91, specifically the levels that will eventually determine impairment for driving under the influence. Right now it's unspecified. And that'll be an important thing for our officers to know. In addition, we're preparing training to all sworn employees as well as staff regarding Measure 91 and what Catherine covered. All of this is, of course, pending what's going to happen in the state legislature and the OLCC rulemaking. Until that point, we have a lot of work to do.
All right. So kind of just to look ahead at some of the timelines that are still in front of us. Again, you've already heard this coming July 1. It is legal to possess marijuana for recreational use. Next January, OLCC will begin receiving license applications for retail establishments. And then in late 2016, OLCC will issue the first retail store licenses for, retail establishments to open. And also, as Lieutenant Bills referred to a moment ago, OLCC is currently drafting rules. They have rule advisory committees on a bunch of different topics, so they're spending the summer drafting rules. We anticipate those draft rules to be out in early fall for public comment. And so we are eagerly waiting to see what is drafted, and then those will be published final sometime probably in November. And as was also stated, we are waiting anxiously and with a lot of interest to see what these final weeks at the legislature hold on a number of topics.
I also just wanted to give you a heads up that once the legislature concludes and we see what legislation is actually adopted, we'll then be able to advise you as to what changes need to be made to Eugene Code just to make it consistent with state law. We know there will be some because of Measure 91, but until the legislature finishes doing whatever it's going to do, we thought it premature to try to bring an ordinance to you now and then bring another one to you in the fall. Instead, once we see what the legislature has concluded in its work, we'll schedule something with you in the fall and say, okay, here are the changes we think you need to make to the Eugene Code. So we'll be back after your break.
All right. Any questions?
So, Mike, I've got you in the queue here.
Can I get in the queue, Madam Mayor?
You certainly can, George. I wanted to comment, and I don't know if all of you have had a chance to look at the article that was in the RG this morning, but some of the comments that were in there were that, at least as they're thinking about now, that you wouldn't sell medical marijuana and recreational marijuana in the same facility, that they're talking about state level of taxation on it, but it's lower than any of the other states, because they don't want it to be the black market to win out. They really want to regulate, and they're looking at the right for giving the right. You don't have to, but giving the right to local communities to exercise, I think, a 3% tax or something like that sort. So those things are all out in front of us as well. I don't know if there's any other pieces of that you can think of. I just thought those were pretty significant for us.
I think those were the big ones.
Okay. And my other, the other interesting comment was that I've seen lately that Costco is preparing to go into the business of selling. And they're in the process of doing that right now. And the other one that I was thinking about is, as we make this transition, we've got a time to do this, and I know you're thinking about this, but I just think it's an opportunity to sort of freshen up our approach about that as a city. And one of the things is to think about how we make public the information to people who may now sort of casually use that here's the new rules. Don't think that you're going to be able to bring it and smoke in our parks or whatever. I mean, I think there's some things, and probably a little bit of a period of warning or something that allows us to get people educated about what the do's and don'ts are, and what that can do is for people who are already not complying with the law, kind of sort of sets a new start button about how we're going to be addressing those issues. So I just wanted to put that out there for you all to think about, that this could provide some opportunity to deal with some issues in a new way, which supports the freedoms that people have, but it also reminds them of the constraints that they need to live under, even with the new realities that we have. So I think that's all going to be a really important thing, and we ought to try to do it in a way that's very sensitive to all of our populations, and that seems to me to be a really important piece. It's not waiting till somebody bumps up against it, but trying to get out in front of it. Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Catherine, definitionally, what does in public mean? Are there, and definitionally where are the overlaps in 91 and application to Indoor Clean Air Act guidelines?
I can answer your first question.
Okay.
But I haven't looked at a comparison between the two. The Measure 91 actually defines public place. It includes it. It is defined as a place in which the general public has access and includes, but is not limited to, hallways, lobbies, other parts of apartment houses and hotels not constituting rooms or apartments designated for actual residents, highways, streets, schools, places of amusement, parks, playgrounds, and premises used in the connection with public passenger transportation.
Public streets?
It says streets.
So those are the places where you can't do it, right?
Correct.
Okay. Next question. What's the difference between a liquid marijuana product and an extract?
So an extract, all of this is defined in Measure 91.
Yeah, I'm asking because my questions are for a lot of people that may be watching us and not really understand what all these pieces are. Also, because I got another couple questions that stem from that.
And I preface that because some of the words are a lot of chemical names. So
Okay.
before I read you the definition, I can tell you that the marijuana extract is a product obtained by separating resins from marijuana by solvent extraction using solvents other than glycerin, such as butane, hexane, some I can't pronounce, ethanol, and carbon dioxide. So,
Well, I know that's quite an issue around public safety, and I'm sure that our department's already on top of that. But I know that the private extract. So, what is meant by marijuana liquids, product liquids? What's that mean?
do you want to speak to that? No, go ahead.
It would be like a tincture, like a tea,
Yeah.
or a soda, or a cola, coffee. They have marijuana beer in Boulder.
Tea.
Tea, yes.
Sorry. Okay. All right. So we know that the extract of oils for any purpose of whatsoever is completely prohibited, both the doing and the possession?
So the way it's defined is obtaining it by separating it using solvents other than. So there are ways to extract it where it is not considered a prohibited marijuana extract. And Lieutenant Bills may be able to speak to this more, but the way they've defined it is it's the marijuana extracts, as marijuana extract is defined in Measure 91, is prohibited. But there are,
Possession?
it is, yes.
Okay.
So there is commercial extraction that can
Right.
occur that creates such things as, the street names would be earwax, because of the way it resembles, that can be put into the electronic cigarettes.
Right.
Right. So there is commercial manufacturing of that is going to be permitted.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get to, because there's going to be, we're going to have a hard time keeping up with technology, I think, with this if we're not really clear about our definitions. So that commercially manufactured and possession of commercially manufactured substances like that is legal.
Yes.
And the way you know the difference between something like that that's commercially manufactured and one that might be done somewhere else is exactly what?
We wouldn't know.
Or in
We
your
wouldn't be
home,
able to tell.
privately. Okay, that's an interesting point that we may want to revisit at some point in the future. Also, the idea that the extraction through legal means, I suppose, that is possible to do. As far as I understand, it does create a volatile public safety hazard when not done properly in a private home.
Correct.
Create a fire hazard, an explosion hazard. So I hope that we're going to be proactive in how we deal with community education, at least, on something like that, or what the council might consider as other local restrictions that we might want to consider. Thank you.
I've got George Poling, followed by Claire, followed by Chris, followed by George Brown. George Poling.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions, and the first one is to Lieutenant Bills. And I'm just curious if the Eugene Police Department is reaching out to police departments in Washington and Colorado to see what kind of emerging problems they're having, what technology they're using to make some of the determinations, is just getting a general feel and idea of what the other police departments in the other two states are doing.
Yes, sir. I spent a couple days in Colorado, in the Denver area, talking to my counterparts about the issue of marijuana and legalization. And I've also spoken at length with Seattle Police Department to see some of the issues that they've been dealing with regarding enforcement, education, regarding enforcement and public education pieces, driving under the influence, and all the other issues that come along with legalization, whether it be increase in crime rate, you name it. So we've been in close contact with our partners in other agencies.
All right, thank you. Another question, and I don't know who's going to be able to answer this, but I'm just curious, does Measure 91 address the use of marijuana in a workplace setting? In other words, can an employer, whether it be a public or private sector, set its own rules and regulations as far as the use or being under the influence of marijuana?
Councilor Polling, this is Alana Holmes. And yes, I think the measure is pretty clear that it does not amend or affect state or federal employment laws. In addition to that, I've talked to and attended some conferences and talked to some attorneys and my counterparts in different parts of the state. And each employer is determining what their, if you want to call it, drug-free workplace policy would be, whether it's very strict to something less than that. You know, it's an individual employer's decision and determination to make via their policy.
Okay. And then my final question is, since marijuana still is against the law, against federal law, is that going to impact the possibility of the city of Eugene applying for and or receiving any federal grants? Do we have any history of that occurring in Colorado or in Washington where they've applied for grants, and since the states are allowing the marijuana, that the federal government says, no, we're not going to issue any grant money?
We did look into this and look to see whether, this is Catherine Brotherton, whether the Federal Drug-Free Workplace Act, which would be, we would need to be in compliance with to apply for and receive certain federal grant monies, whether that would mandate certain policies for the city of Eugene and any other city in the state. And the conclusion is that it would be that we need to maintain our current, which we have now, drug-free workplace, which goes to prohibiting marijuana use at the workplace or during work hours. So that is our current policy. That won't change. So, but mandating a certain policy that would prohibit off-time use on the weekends by City of Eugene employees, that wouldn't be something that is mandated for compliance with the Federal Drug-Free Workplace Act.
Okay, thank you very much.
Claire.
Thank you. We'll have to say it's a little surreal to have our assistant city attorney here talking about these things, but that's where we are today. So I just wanted to echo a couple of things the mayor pointed out. It seems to me, and I know there's still a lot going on at the legislature, but it does appear that they're maintaining our medical marijuana system separately from this new retail environment. And so the rules and regulations that we have around medical marijuana patients' access and dispensaries aren't going to change. Do there's still some question.
I know, I think on Sunday, I read a few articles, and then I heard something this week that I think at least for an interim period, they are talking about the possibility of allowing medical dispensaries to double as retail until retail is set up. I mean, I think part of it is, there's legal recreational use come July 1, but retail operations don't open for at least another year and a half. So kind of the cart before the horse question. I think they're trying to figure out how to deal with it. I don't know what they'll decide, but it is something being considered at this time.
But they're no longer in the position, some folks were talking about getting rid of our medical marijuana regime and shoving everyone to make them go and just do retail.
Haven't
That's
seen
no
that at all.
longer
No.
the conversation.
Right. Everything I've heard so far is this will, for people who currently fall into the medical marijuana program, they will be unaffected by any legislative action. So they can continue to do what they've been doing. This is really what's going to happen with people who want to engage in recreational use.
Yeah, great, thanks. So I think that's important to remember. And I think I could have this wrong, but I think medical marijuana patients have the right to do extraction at home, the kind of dangerous extraction. I might be wrong on that.
I would have to get back to you
Okay.
on that, Councilor Surratt. I don't know.
Because I share Councilor Clark's concern about the safety hazard that involves. And then in terms of the mayor mentioning that the legislature is considering allowing a local piece of a local tax, while I wasn't supportive of us trying to pass a tax before, if that's where the legislature ends up, I'm all for us imposing our own local tax within the ability that we're allowed to. I think that would be a good thing for us to talk about, and I would probably support it. So thank you very much for the information. I really appreciate all the work I know that the police department's been doing, and it's good to see the other work that the city's been doing to prepare us for this, end of prohibition.
Chris.
Thank you. In trying to understand, so you can explain it simply, so I could explain it simply to somebody around the consumption aspect, would it be, and I realize it's a bit of an exaggeration, but would it be possible to say that, the rules that apply to alcohol are basically the rules that apply to marijuana? You can't drink in public. You can't smoke in public. You can't walk around with an open container. You can't walk around smoking a joint. You can't go into a restaurant and just start drinking. You need to order whatever. That may be one area where it is kind of confusing. I can go into a restaurant and get a bottle of wine, but I can't go into a restaurant and order a joint. So we'll have to figure out what that is. But in general, if you were to tell people, basically think about marijuana the same way you think about alcohol. What you can't do with alcohol, you can't do with marijuana. Would that be a simple way to kind of explain it to folks?
Yes.
You can't drink and drive. You can't smoke and drive.
Correct.
You can't drink in public. You can't smoke in public. And so say what the rules around alcohol are basically the same rules, with maybe some exceptions. With that in mind, then, and you talked about retail. As of July 1, what would be an individual's legal opportunity to acquire marijuana on July 1?
So there's a small gap between the legal attaining of marijuana that the state legislature right now is trying to figure out how to fix. In reading the law, if you could grow the plant in one day, you could legally deliver to somebody else under Measure 91. But as we've all noted, there's a gap that exists.
So
and
on
how
July
they got
1,
the plant or the seed, I don't know.
So on July 1, you're not going to see everybody lighting up unless they've already got a plant, which they planted illegally. But on July 1, all is forgiven, and if they have a plant, then they could harvest it. But that would be about the only way until some sort of a retail option is established. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. The last thing, I remember serving on a committee at Serenity Lane a number of years ago, and they were very interested in the topic of what constitutes impairment and what constitutes workplace impairment, and then how do you deal with that. And they were talking about medical marijuana because you have a permit that says you can consume, but if you're impaired on the job. I would assume, going back to the alcohol analogy, that workplaces could establish similar kinds of rules around consumption of marijuana that they do around consumption of alcohol.
Absolutely. The discussion about impairment in the workplace, whether it's alcohol, other drugs, or marijuana, an employer has the right to establish that and say you can't come to work under the influence, you can't come to work impaired, and then, you're training up supervisors and others to recognize what that is.
Yeah, so the parallels with alcohol, it's probably pretty clear why they gave it to OLCC to regulate, because they have all the experience in altering kinds of substances. So the parallels with alcohol, I think, are probably very important ones to keep in mind in terms of workplaces, in terms of consumption, in terms of other elements. There will be areas that are probably different. You don't do a lot of extraction with alcohol. But I think in general, if you were advising people, that advice might be a good way to just approach it.
George Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a very interesting discussion. There's still so much that's unknown, and everyone's feeling their way through all the complexities of this. My main questions were answered in your response to Councilor Syrat's questions about, I was wondering if, will it affect the medical marijuana program? And that's been answered. And the answer is no, it won't. So I really don't have any other questions. But I got kind of a comment. I mean, I think July 1st we're going to see some smokeouts around town of celebration. And unless someone has a medical marijuana card, they are going to be smoking black market, quote unquote, marijuana, and until the legal pipeline is set up for the supply. So I would just be aware, expect that to happen, and not get too excited about it, and just let it happen. And I mean, unless really bad stuff starts happening, which I don't imagine. I mean, it'll happen in Colorado, it'll happen in Washington. So I just don't think we should run out and try to arrest 500 people or however many it's going to be. Just let the excitement happen one day and then get over it. And then, anyway, that would be my advice. Thank you.
Mike, I've got you in the queue for the second round. But one comment I wanted to make is I would really like to, maybe in a memo form, if that's the easiest thing for you, Jen, is I'd really like to hear what you've learned from other places about the law enforcement issues and have some sense of what they've experienced. So whatever you've gleaned that you can share with us, I think would be great.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mike?
Legal pipeline. That was funny. So, okay, George Polling asked a question that I wanted to kind of expand on a little bit more. I don't know at the moment what policies there are around drug use in public housing or affordable or subsidized housing with CDBG federal grant money. Perhaps someone more wiser than I can do that, because it sounds to me like some of the only places you're going to be able to do this are in your home. So if you're in a home that has federally subsidized housing, can you do that? Or does the city run into some issues around that? What's the...
I can answer the second part of your question. The city would not run into an issue if an individual in subsidized housing decided to smoke. I don't know the answer to the question of whether HUD would have any rules about whether you can smoke pot given the federal law. We can probably find that out for you and send you an email or send you a memo to let you know.
Okay, cool. The other thing I wonder is there are wonderful smoke shops where they sell cigars and things and pipe tobacco and all that sort of whatnot, and vape stores and all that. So will we see, based on what you mentioned, not just perhaps a marijuana store where you can buy some, but places where you can try it, or marijuana bars? Will we see that as a part of the licensing process at the end of 16?
Not currently with what we have now.
The Measure 91 doesn't provide for, that would be considered public consumption if you were, so right now, the way it is written, there is no licensure for a marijuana bar type establishment. They are all for retail sales.
So it'd really be more like a grocery store and not like a bar you'd go to downtown.
Correct.
Okay. One of the other, it's not a smokehouse. Okay.
Right.
So one of my other questions, though, about this is something that somebody brought up to me the other day, and I didn't have a good answer for this. Honestly don't know, but I know there's some people looking at it. So the kind of places where these stores will be located as we get to that point, does our zoning code affect where those will necessarily end up being? In other words, questions around, will they all be clustered in the same place or not? Is that good or is that bad? So I would wonder what will be the effect of our current zoning ordinances around where these places will be located relative to one another.
So currently, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We looked at some of those issues as part of the medical marijuana facilities and where those could be located. It's my guess is, and Catherine knows more, she'll correct me, is that a medical or a recreational facility retail operation is going to be considered a commercial operation. So unless the zone allows a commercial operation, you're not going to be able to locate a facility in that zone.
But any place that is a commercial zone.
My guess would be, since we didn't anticipate when we created the zones that there would be recreational marijuana retail, that there's nothing that speaks specifically to something like that. We can certainly check into it and then let you know.
Will it be able to be sold in bars and not used there?
It has to. You have to be specifically licensed.
Right.
They're going to have. You have to be licensed for recreational, and there's 4 different types of licenses.
So you can get a license if you're, let's say you're one of our local breweries, one of our local, manufacturers of beer, and you want to grow your own marijuana and sell it too. So if the OLCC says you can do that, here's your license. So a bar like that would be able to not use it there, but you can sell it there, right?
So that's going to come all out of the OLCC rules that are being drafted right now. They have to be, it can't be a place where somebody under 21 years of age is, but you're talking about a bar. That's going to come all out of these OLCC rules that we're looking to see. All the specifics of the licensing, who can get licensed, all of that. I can say when it comes to the citing, one of the things that we've been waiting for out of the legislature is whether they're going to put some citing specifics, like not within a specific number of feet or miles of a school.
And that was mentioned in the article today.
And the last House bill, I think, on it was it's actually giving the authority back to local governments to, if they would want to, could adopt a zoning code provision that says not within a mile of a school. So that could be another thing also that
Are
comes
we
back.
currently have any of our staff members around this working or looking at the zoning questions involved?
Right now, we've looked at really what there is to look at, and we were waiting to see what the legislature was going to say. We've looked at, and that's why, there's just a lot of open questions right now. If it comes back to, if what ends up getting adopted by the legislature is the local authority to adopt some restrictions around schools, and there's direction from the council for us to bring back an ordinance like that. Now we'll look at what we're talking about, where that.
I am aware of some U of O grad students doing study on the zoning questions. Perhaps I could connect you and everyone takes advantage of their work. I don't know.
So, Mike, if you could ask them to send that information to Catherine, she'll get it to the right team members. When I mentioned earlier that we'd come back in the fall after we saw what the legislature actually did, to the extent that the legislature has said, here's some things that local governments can do, we will identify those for you, and then you can tell us whether you want us to pursue any analysis, research, bringing back options related to those. So, for example, the tax question, when we come back to you, we'll say, if that's what the legislature does, legislature said Local government could have up to a 3% tax. Do you want us to do anything with this? So we'll bring you back all of those options so you can decide if you want to do something or not.
Thank you.
Claire?
Actually, Catherine addressed what I was going to speak to.
Well, that was just enough information to whet our appetite, so to speak, or
Use up with the metaphor stuff, guys. I mean, come on, really?
I just think it has so many circles that go out there. It's hard to know where we're going to end up, but it's good to be thinking about it and sharing as much information as you can with us. So thanks very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Mayor, before we finish up, I've asked Pete to come in and just give an update on a particular situation.
Oh, yeah. Good. Welcome, Chief. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your
Thanks, guys.
team's work. Yeah.
Pretty complex work.
Yeah.
They've done a good job with it. We had an incident today at South Eugene High School. This is the last day of school there this year, and led to a lockdown. Everybody's okay, but it was a little frightening. This is a SWAT training day for our police department, and one of our SWAT team members asked permission from his supervisor to visit his child at the YMCA. So in his camouflage police uniform, he parked his car at South Eugene High School. He's wearing his all the markings of a police officer, but in camouflage uniform, and wearing his pistol and badge and all those things. So he visited his kid, met with her mother, went to the track, and then he walked back alone to his car, and he was seen walk into his car by a facilities worker from 4J, it sounds like, who called a custodian inside the school and then third-hand report to the police department. And so it sounds like the training that we've provided for Bethel and 4J and helped Lane County with outlying school districts in the last year has paid off, because everybody did what you'd want them to do. Unfortunately, it was pretty upsetting for a number of folks, so we're working through that. The good news is that the training that we've provided has been good, and the incident has sort of accelerated the conversations we're having about communities' concerns about the militarization of police and SWAT uniforms and vernacular and all those things. So that all has a little more meaning after today's experience. So we've already spoken with the media and explained all this, so parents should know what happened, and I apologize for what the school has had to go through. And we'll be more thoughtful about things like this in the future.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Be like a taxi cab and have an off-duty light on.
Really? I was at Vero at 10 o'clock, and the cars were